All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Panu Eruma. I'm CTO here at Frantic, and it's so nice to have you all here. You are mostly welcome. I believe you have found pizza and drinks from there, and toilets over there, and what else? There will be more pizza, so please take as much as you want. I believe it won't be finished. So, yes, welcome and have a nice evening. Nico has a few words.
Hi, I'm Nico, one of the organizers, together with Sami, Sonia, Kenda downstairs, who you probably saw when you came in. Marco's somewhere, I don't know. We're usually five organizers. But, so yeah, welcome. This is our last meetup for this year. A bit of a different venue than normally for those who've been coming to our meetups. This is actually quite nice. Really appreciate the pizza. Thank you very much. And cozy, kind of nice Christmassy atmosphere. So a lot of people have been asking us to do kind of a more beginners-oriented WordPress meetup, which is this. And Sami has come all the way from the north to give us this talk. Hopefully you'll stay here for next year.
Yeah.
We've missed you a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, without further ado, let's give a big applause to Sami. He'll probably present the details of his talk when he starts.
Yeah, thank you very much. And once more, big thank you to Frantic for sponsoring the space and the drinks and everything that you might eat in here. As Nico mentioned, today is really going to be a beginner's talk about how to build a WordPress theme. How many of you have never built a WordPress theme? About half, I would say. That's great, because that's basically for you. If you have already built lots of themes in your hobby sites or in the work or something, this might be like a even too beginners stuff for you, but it never hurts to kind of go back to the ground. It was actually pretty fun to kind of go way back in time. When I was doing this presentation, naturally it happens kind of just the last minute, like last night and night before. And it was really kind of nice to get an idea that where should we actually start when we start building themes? And what's like the most important thing where we should start? I'm kind of already kind of went too much ahead that I don't kind of think that much too often, and this was a good kind of way of coming back to roots. If you want to check the slides already in the same time, it's going to be found in the github.com. Sami Keijonen alku. And the thing that I'm going to do today is that I'm briefly going to talk about first what I have there in GitHub. And then I'm going to present that. Let's build a theme from scratch. I know live demo is never going to work. It's not going to work today either. But maybe you learn a little bit more when you actually see things happening on screen than I was just about to tell you that. By written word. So let's get started. We only gonna scratch the surface here. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go back to basics and go back to basics in a way that the markup is everything that you should focus on first. What the WordPress site actually spits out in the front end, which is called the markup. Then we talk about a little bit, okay, how you can imbue your style sheet, that you can actually have styles on the site. Then we're gonna talk about template files, what that relates to WordPress and WordPress themes. Then we briefly gonna talk about the mystical loop, that how to actually fetch the data from the database, that you don't kind of have to do anything. It's just kind of copy paste this mystical loop and it just works. Then we're gonna talk about a little bit about template hierarchy, that you get a short glance that what kind of different template files can you have inside a theme and how that basically works. And hopefully after that we have some time for you for your questions, and feel free to stop me anytime in between also, so we can kind of have a conversation about the team structure and the basics of a team. So I'm gonna first just spend like 5 to 10 minutes to walk you through that what those markup style sheet template files, the loop and template hierarchy kind of means, and then we actually going to build the theme. So the first part is that, okay, when you install the WordPress installation in your hopefully local environment, which is totally different topic, but I'm gonna give you like 30 seconds intro on that also. You're gonna need to understand a little bit the WordPress folder structure, and when you open WordPress installation, you notice that, okay, there is this folder called WP content, and inside there's a folder called themes. You're gonna put your own custom theme inside the themes folder. And today we are going to create a theme called Alku, which is kind of a Finnish word, could translate that beginner or beginner. So we're gonna start with that step to actually creating that folder, and boom, then we're gonna start actually crafting our theme. There are only a couple of required template files what you need to have inside the WordPress theme. In our case, it's going to be this WP content themes and Alku folder. Inside that folder, we need 2 template files, and they are called index.php and style.css. If you have ever built any websites, you might remember that inside the folder, if you have a file called index.html or index.php, that's always kind of rendering first. This is kind of the same logic. This is like the fallback of the fallback in every of those template files that WordPress is looking after. If you don't have anything else above that, it's going to find the index.php file. So you have to have that file in your WordPress theme. You might guess that style.css is about your styles, and today we're gonna not concentrate that much on the styling part of the theme, but it's really important to know that you're gonna need to have that file there anyway. And like I mentioned, everything really starts with the plan that what is going to be a markup on your site. And those who know me a little bit better know that I'm really into accessibility. I'm kind of been doing the accessibility stuff, I don't know, 6-7 years now, and it all starts with the semantic markup. If you haven't kind of pay attention to your markup since today, now it's about the time, because like 90% of the accessibility issues are gone with the semantic markup. And this is kind of the lesson for that also, that okay, what do you mean by semantic markup? And in our really, really basic theme, we're gonna start with maybe rip off like the HTML5 boilerplate index file, copy paste that in our theme, and then start kind of hacking from there and adding the basic elements in the site what we might need. We probably have a header section pretty much in every site where we might have a site logo, maybe navigation. Then we probably have a main content of the site. Then we probably have some kind of footer information. So those are the actual markup that we are going to use: header, nav, main, and footer. Pretty much every site should have those markup inside them, no matter if it's a WordPress theme or not. After that, if you are familiar with the WordPress admin interface, we can go to Appearance Themes, and we can actually see our theme, and we can even activate the theme even if we don't have like any data inside them. The next part is basically going some basic information that WordPress wants to have inside the style.css file. Notice that I link these links in here. Your kind of, after this meetup, your job is kind of to take a deeper look at the theme handbook. everything is documented in there, what I'm going to talk about today. So you don't have to memorize all these mystical functions and structure and template hierarchy. It's all documented already. And I didn't want to copy paste those things in here because, you know, all the latest information is going to be in here. So we only going to need update our style.css a little bit so-called header comment section, which means that we're gonna give a WordPress some information that what's our theme name, we're gonna call it Alku, who's the author of the theme, and perhaps a version. There are lots of other header section things that you can add in there, but we're gonna start with those three basics. We basically need at least those information in there. After that, when we have like a basic setup for style.css file, we're gonna open up another required file, which was the index.php, and we're gonna add in the kind of the mystical loop in there. In short, the loop means that WordPress have this way of displaying content from the database with this mystical looking so-called loop. The actual loop part is checking that do we even have that post that we are acquiring, and if we have that post in there, let's use some WordPress built-in functions, template functions. In this case, the function called the content. It actually outputs all of the content what it tries to query, homepage or about page or an article or whatever the content might be in there. After that, we can kind of see that, okay, we actually have something going on in the site. After that, we're gonna kind of restructure our theme a little bit so that we're gonna have more template files than only the index.php file. We're gonna add in the header.php, the footer.php, which you might guess that header.php kind of contains all of the information that are repeated in every view of your site in the top of the pages. And footer.php for that purpose, that which is repeated in every single view or page on your site. So we're gonna use a couple of those template files already in there that gives you a little bit more structure inside the theme and a little bit easier to maintain for you. After that, we're gonna notice, okay, we basically broke our theme. It doesn't work anymore. We're gonna need a couple of extra functions into the theme, which basically needs to be there that the theme even works and the plugin even works that you might install on your site. So we're gonna add a get header function into the header.php file, which basically gets our header PHP files and includes that. Same for the footer, which is the function called get footer. Even after that, our site is still broken. We still need a couple more things that WordPress is looking for inside the theme that it actually can work. The next part is going to be that, okay, we're gonna need a couple of so-called hooks inside the header.php and inside the footer.php. The first hook that WordPress is like really keen to have in there in the header section is so-called WPP head. It needs to go just inside your head tag, and WP footer just needs to go just inside the body tag. For example, all the styles and JavaScript files are enqueued into those hooks. So if you don't have those, it's a big possibility that nothing basically works on your site. So those are pretty much mandatory in there. And once we soon kind of start out building this from scratch, you kind of notice all the differences while we build this theme. You kind of notice, okay, when this part is missing, all this stuff is missing from the site. When this is here, this kind of appears here, and so on. Next template file that we're gonna add in there is functions.php file. It's loaded by WordPress automatically. If it's there, it's mostly used about some kind of functionality of your theme. There are lots of so-called theme supports that's supposed to be inside the theme, and functions.php is a good starting point for those kind of functionality. We're going to add a couple of those just as an example that what could go into the functions.php file. Basically, every functionality can be in the functions.php file. If it's going to be like bloating up a little bit, then you can chunk that up in smaller pieces and including those extra files from the functions.php file. But we are definitely not going that far today. One thing that we're going to do inside the function.php file is, even we have the style.css file, WordPress doesn't auto-load that. Even if we start adding styles in the style.css file, nothing basically happens. WordPress way of doing the style sheet is basically enguing that style sheet with the function called wp-engun style. You could basically hard code that style sheet also in the head section, but I wouldn't recommend that because, you know, plugins or other functionality of the site might depend on that you actually use the built-in functions what comes to WordPress. So I would definitely recommend using the built-in functions for that. It's also handy for versioning and having dependencies and stuff like that behind the scenes if you need them. Second part, what we're going to do in the function.php file is that we really don't have any dynamic data yet in the header section. We're going to first hard code some kind of navigation in the header section. We probably want to use the WordPress menu system behind the scenes. That when we add menu in WordPress admin interface, we're going to actually see that menu going on in the front end also. And that's a good place for function.php functionality. So we basically go into first register our menu, and then we go into actually use that menu in the front end. And like you probably already noticed, there seems to be a lot of kind of built-in function inside WordPress that, okay, register nav menus probably means what it's kind of called. We are going to add some navigation menus in here. We at least needs to have an ID and a location for that menu. You don't have to worry about too much that if you haven't seen even PHP code before. The PHP is really limited at first, and you can probably just pick the PHP just basically looking at the names of the functions. You don't have to worry about that too much, that do you need to understand much of the PHP or not. Once we have that menu in place, then we can actually use that menu in the front end of our site. That really depends on your theme design where you want to output that menu, but in our case we're going to open up again the header.php file and another function called wp-nav menu. We're going to add that menu in there, and then we have the dynamic menu in our WordPress. After that, we're going to briefly touch about the template hierarchy, which means that there are lots of different views in WordPress. There are different post types like page or post or archive views, home page, front page, depending on which naming convention you might need. And we can have different template file for each of those views. And we're going to test out a couple of those template files. Just get an idea that what the template hierarchy might mean. We're going to test out the page.php, which is called when we are viewing page. We are going to test out single.php, which is called when an article or post is viewed. And those are basically looked up first before the index.php file. So if we're going to add these template files, WordPress is going to look that first if we are viewing the page, or single.php, it's going to look up that first if we are viewing the article page. You can see that in action soon, that what it actually means. Then if we have time, we're going to tweak it a little bit more. We still have a couple of so-called static data going on inside our theme. We probably need to auto-update the actual page title automatically and not hard code that. No surprises there. There is the, sorry, I was kind of ahead of my head. The title actually means the page title or the post title, not the document title. But it doesn't surprise that there is a function for that. The title basically gets the correct page title from the database. And you can basically output that anywhere in your markup. Same with date. We can test that with the post. That okay, we probably want to have published date in the post. We can use the get the date function for that. Then if we have time, we're going to clean up the kind of the couple of things that are still static in our theme. In header.php, HTML is missing the language attributes. Also in header.php, at the moment we only have hard-coded document title in there. We're going to switch that to a different dynamic one. So if we're going to have time, we're going to go back to the function of the PHP file and add a couple of the so-called theme support in there in the theme, that those hard-coded parts of the theme works dynamically. For example, the document title in the head section or language attributes about your document. That's a rough outline. Do you have questions about what we're gonna build soon? If you have never built a theme, even this might be like a top of your head, but don't worry. We're gonna build it right in front of your eyes, so you can see that how it actually being worked out. You can already see the end result in this repo, and basically gonna recreate that now. Do you have any questions? You probably do. All right, then let's get started to actually build the theme. I'm just gonna follow my instructions, which you should be able to do when you get home or over the weekend, that how you can kind of build from scratch. Just a note, when you build themes more, at some point, you never build them from scratch. You have probably heard a thing called starter themes. We kind of have a skeleton theme already built in, that we don't have to do this all over again every time we launch a site. The natural reasons are time. We don't want to waste time rewriting every single piece of this every time we start building stuff. So we use some kind of starter themes, but that's a totally different topic. This is going to the basic, what should be inside the theme. Okay, let's get started. I have here installation from local by Flywheel. If you have never had a WordPress installation in your local environment, meaning your laptop or computer, I would say that local by Flywheel is the easiest tool that there is. Just install local by Flywheel and you can basically just add a new site and then you are ready to rock and roll. I have already, as you can see, I already have different installations. I'm not going to spend time to actually install a new WordPress installation now. I'm going to use the Foxland Hub installation, which I have in place already. And in my editor, I have the themes folder in there. So on the left you can see that here is my theme folders, this is kind of my notes in here, and now we basically just gonna start kind of replicating what we should do in here. So this folder is basically the WP content themes folder, and inside there I already have several themes, but today we're gonna build a new one which was called Alku. So the step one was basically create a new folder inside themes folder, and that's exactly what I have in here now. The next step was that, okay, it needs at least those two template files, index.php and style.css. We're gonna basically create them. I'm gonna work in the editor, so you can definitely do these folders and files in wherever you want, like in here for example, but I'm just gonna use the editor so I don't have to jump around between different parts. So the index.php file was the first one, and then the style.css was the second one. Here is our theme that we start to mock up in here. Those were the files that were needed in there. And now it's up to us that what markup do we want to show in the front end. And that was pretty much the most important part even with these instructions, that semantic markup is like the biggest thing that you need on the site. I'm just gonna open this HTML boilerplate index.html, I think, and I'm just gonna copy paste that so I have something going on in here. And I'm wrong file, it's index.php file, right? So every site should start with the document type, which in this case is HTML. Then we need to have HTML tag ending with the HTML tag. We need to have some head tag information. We need to have body tag, and I'm gonna rip off everything else that's there because we're gonna replace that with something that we actually need. So I'm just gonna rip off everything inside the body tag. We're gonna add something in there in just a minute. No, theme colors, no thank you. We're gonna remove all the style sheet even, all the manifest info. But what we're gonna leave in there is, we're gonna leave some meta information inside the head, which are pretty much mandatory. So in every site, you should basically have document title. As you can see, I'm now just hard coding that. In the last part, we're gonna replace that with the dynamic document title. You're probably not even gonna need any descriptions. Let's remove that. Then you're gonna need the viewport information about scaling that. The scaling works as it should in different mobile devices. So these are the basic information that we're gonna start with. Then I was mentioning that, okay, those are not the only ones that needs to be there. Pretty much every site needs a header section. Usually there is navigation, always main content, pretty much always footer. So I'm just gonna add those in there already in the index.php file. So that's our header section. We don't have to modify that. But inside the body tag, which is the actual thing that we're gonna build in here, I'm just gonna copy paste some in here. So we have a header. Inside there, we probably gonna have logo and perhaps navigation. So I'm just gonna add navigation in there. As you can see at the moment, I'm just hard coding my navigation. Let's say it's a list about let's say I have only 2 pages at the moment, so I'm just gonna hard code it, no big deal. Let's call it home. And the second link could be about. You couldn't get any more basics than that. Before going on, gonna jump back in a bit. We could even try out activate our theme and see what happens in the site. Hopefully it doesn't break. So this is the WordPress installation and admin interface. I'm under Appearance Themes. Here is my theme called Algo. Even if I don't have any header information in the style.css file yet, it's still located in that. And I can even activate that. And I'm just gonna open one page if I can find it quickly, so I have some data to show you. Of course I won't find it yet. If I don't, I'm just gonna take something else. Okay, I'm just gonna use that one for a while. That's kind of my home page. So this is my WordPress theme installation. It looks like this. I do have all the things that I just put in there. If I view the source, I have everything I just put in the index.php file. But you probably noticed that it's not really that dynamic yet. It's just static HTML at the moment. And we haven't even finalized the things that we needed in there. So let's go back a little bit, add in the main section and add in the footer section. Here is our header section. Next is up our main section. Let's add one paragraph just in case that we need. Let's close the main one and then add the footer also. Just close it, and I'm just gonna copy paste one paragraph in there. This is our footer. So we have basic structure going on in here. We have HTML opening, closing. We have some header information in there. And inside the body tag, we have the crucial markup, semantic markup that we can use in there. We have header, we have navigation, we have main content our side, and we have footer of our side. Now if I go back to my site and front end, you can see that my hardcore stuff are there. So the theme is kind of working already. Now it's just missing all the missing parts that we're gonna add in there. Any questions so far? Are you still kind of following along? Nothing too crazy yet, just HTML. Okay, let's go back. What are our next steps? Update the header information in style.cs file. As you can see, I could already update or activate the theme even if I don't have any of this header section information. But you're gonna, it's like a good practice to have there anyways. I'm just gonna copy paste this information. That theme name is Alku and I'm the author and this is the version. And we're gonna definitely need to add some styles in there in the end anyways. The difference is here that if I now go back to the admin interface and check the information in here, I have even some information about the theme. That okay, it's called Alku and that's the version and that's the author. Without those header information, you wouldn't have that kind of information anywhere. like I mentioned, we are not styling that much our theme. I'm just gonna copy paste the styles in the end if we have time, but that would be a different topic to have, that how the actually styles works and what is the CSS even. But now we are in the spot that there are lots of static things going on in our theme. Even if it's working, it's not really output anything that I have just used in my site. So let's try to figure the next steps. The next steps are the kind of the classical loop. So we actually need to fetch the information from the database and output that information whatever view we are on. Are we on the home page or post or archive view or whatever that might be. The loop kind of works behind the scenes like that. It's a little bit PHP, as you can see. It's gonna check, do we actually have any post on that view? In archive view, let's say on category archive view, you probably don't have any post on that view. So we need to check it first. Then while we have that post, then we can do any functions inside that loop. And the content is like the main function that actually gonna output every content of that view what you might have in there. I'm just gonna basically copy paste that code snippet inside the index.php file, inside the main tag, and see what's happening after that. So this is the opening PHP tag, this is the closing PHP tag. So you can jump off and on from HTML and PHP like this. So I'm just gonna copy paste that in the main section, right? Here is the main section, and okay, I have some kind of linters going on in here. It doesn't like me, doesn't matter. I don't have time to fix all of those errors. The main point is that we have our main loop going on right in here. And this is kind of the most important function that we have in there, so-called the content, which kind of means, okay, give me the content of that view. I'm gonna save it. Let's go back to our site. Notice that we have still this static data. Let's refresh. And we have data from that view. This is basically my home page, and at least I have something from there. This is basically the information that I have written into the editor in this home page. So it seems to be working. So all we need is so-called loop. What is the next part? Next part is a little bit organizing our theme a little bit, that it really quickly get out of hand if you try to put everything inside the index.php file. It's gonna end up massive in the end. So early beginning, it's a good practice to kind of chop that down into smaller pieces. And these are the so-called template files that we're gonna use. Header is for repeating stuff in every view, and the footer for repeating stuff in the footer. So let's create those files in the root of our theme, and then basically we're gonna cut some information from the index.php file, which are like on the top of the index.php file, paste that into the header.php. Let's do the same for the bottom of that file and paste that into the footer.php file. So we have a little bit organization going on in there. Let's do that next. So what we should do next is create two new files, header.php and footer.php. Now we have 4 files altogether in there. And what we were supposed to do is copy paste some information from the index.php file in the header file. So I would basically start with where the header ends. This is like repeating in every view of my site, so I'm just gonna cut that off and paste that into the header.php. I'm gonna do the same for the footer part, which is basically this part over here, and paste that into the footer. If I now go back to my site, you probably see that it's broken again. I just lost my static navigation from the header. I just lost my footer information. It was supposed to be here, but it's not anymore. So when making that switch, we need to call those files. We need to call that header file and we need to call that footer file so that WordPress knows to include those. So the next steps was basically use built-in function getHeader, which basically includes that header.php file, where we should put that function. Where should getHeader function call be? In which file? Raise your hand or just yell. Yeah, it should go to the index.php file. It should go right in there where we just cut off the text, right? Because we want to replace that. So let's put that in there. Let's go back to the index.php file. Note that this is PHP. We need the PHP tags. This is the opening tag. This is the closing tag. Let's call that getHeader function. I'm going to save it, go back to my page, and you should see the static navigation in top of the page. Now it includes that header.php file in every call of the WordPress site. Let's do the same for the footer, and that would go in here. We don't have that much going on in the footer. We only have like one sentence. Is it even showing in there? Might be out of the view at the moment. Sorry, get footer. No wonder it's not working. This is our footer. It's there. So this is basically template functions that this includes the header.php file and this includes the footer.php file. Now the next part is one of the mandatory things also, that it's kind of a, I don't know if it's a kind of a hidden, but it's still documented in the site I linked in here. You need a couple of hooks. Don't worry about too much what hooks actually means, but we're going to use lots of those hooks in the end of this presentation. And we're going to need a couple of those hooks right away because lots of those styles and scripts are included in those hooks by default in WordPress. WP head is the hook that's supposed to be just inside the head tag. So I'm just going to copy paste that in the index.php file. Sorry, not the index.php file. Where should I put this function? It says that it should go just inside the head. Yeah, that should be the header now. So let's open the header.php file and put that in there, because we just created those files in here. So just before the header tag, right? Let's open the PHP again, close it. I'm just gonna copy paste the WP head in there. You notice the difference when I now refresh the site. If I now refresh the site, nothing happens. Well, something happened behind the scenes actually, a lot. It's just not shown in the front end. If we now look at the source, there are lots of things going on. This wasn't here just before I added that. So WebPay actually adds a lot of stuff behind the scenes in that hook. What you can actually see in the front end now that I'm logged in, if I use the, let's say, where should it go? It should go right inside the body tag. Where should I add that? It says that another hook called WP footer just inside the body tag. Where is our body tag now? Sorry? Not in the index anymore. We already created the different file for the end of our, yeah, in the footer. So let's take that and put inside the footer.php. Sorry, did I make a mistake? Yeah, of course I did. You were right. We should probably organize this a little bit better.
One small question, if it's possible, okay? Do you, in your practicing, like today practice, use some kind of tweak templates together with WordPress, or it's not yet implemented?
I personally never use any template system. It's just an extra layer for me. So I know that many people do use them because they hate the loop and stuff like that. But I never actually needed them. For me, they are just extra layers, and that's would be kind of different topic anyways. Yeah. Yep, could be easily possible. I'm just gonna take another look that, okay, this might be a little bit better organized than I have at the moment. We should probably have the index.php file ending right over here, and we should probably have the last bit in the footer.php, so it would be a little bit more organized. This should definitely go in here. Then we have the hook called WP footer. Let's put that now in the correct place. This is probably a little bit better organized in that we actually have all the header stuff in the header.php file and all the stuff in the footer.php file that are actually end of our documentation. Now it looks a little bit better. When I now refresh the page, you can see that there is this toolbar that WordPress spits out when I'm logged in. It means that WP footer used that hook to actually output that toolbar in there. So there are lots of things happening inside those hooks. The first hook was called WP head, which should go inside the head. And the second one was the WP footer, which would go just inside the body tag. Now we kind of have our basic structure in place, and if we would build like a really basic theme, this would be enough. The next part would be that I'm just need styles for my site. So next part would be that I would open the style.css file and actually start writing the styles for my theme. And most of the work would be actually styling part, which is kind of the part that I kind of enjoy most. I'm kind of painting the site from scratch. I have a white screen and content, and then actually start the magic. But we did have a couple of extra steps after that. Do you have questions so far? So briefly what we have at the moment, we have our index.php file, which calls the header.php file. It calls the footer.php file, and in between we have so-called main content. And inside the main content, we have so-called loop, which basically fetches the content from the database, depending on the view we are. Then, after that, we would actually start writing our styles. But before we even copy-paste any styles in here, we're just gonna check the next parts that, okay, what's still kind of missing from our theme. The next part is definitely that the actual style sheet is not even used in the site yet. We have the style.css file, but it's not auto-loaded by WordPress. You have to actually load it by yourself. And the terminology is like we enqueue that style sheet. And there's no surprises there that there is kind of built-in function for that called WPP enqueue style function. And we're going to enqueue our main style sheet using that function basically. And before we do that, this is the time that we're going to add another file in our root of our theme, which is called the functions.php. That's kind of automatically loaded by WordPress, so you can add functionality of your theme inside that file. For example, loading that style sheet, and then after that we're gonna take a look at how the menu system works in WordPress and how we can use that in the front end. So the next part is creating that file, functions.php. WordPress auto-loads that. Whatever PHP I write in there, it's gonna run. Notice the difference between, let's say, index.php file and functions.php file. Index.php file, for example, it's outputting something in the front end, so it holds the markup. But functions.php, it's not part of the template hierarchy. It's not outputting anything by default in those views. So it's only about functionality of your site, that you're going to add some functionality here and there. For example, actually enqueuing that style sheet. And that's the first part we are basically going to do. I'm just basically going to copy paste that. There isn't that much going on in this function. It's just giving that we need to open PHP first. What it basically does is we have function called WP enqueue style. This is kind of the ID or hook name for that. So we can unqueue also these if needed. In this case, there is another function called getStyleSheet URL from there, which basically points to our style.css file. And after that, it's going to enqueue that in our front end. Let's do a demonstration. Let's comment that off for a while. Here is my site. Let's say that I'm going to test it out with changing the link colors, for example. I'm going to go back to the style.css file and actually write our first styles in there. Let's say that I'm going to want my links to have different styles. Let's say pretty dark. And now I go back to my site, refresh, nothing happens. So my style.css file, it's not actually rendering at all yet into the site. If I now go back to the functions.php file, use the WP enqueue style function, go back to the site, I can see the change. Now the links are dark, that 333. So I know now that, okay, my style sheet are actually in use. If you're uncertain, you can always go to the source and then what was the name of my hook? It was something called style. Okay, I'm just gonna call it like alku style. So I'm gonna find it a little bit more easier. Find it alku. Here you go. Here's my style sheet. So now it would be just up to me that, okay, what kind of style sheet I want to write in there and what kind of CSS I would put there. That would be, once again, a different topic. But at least we know that the system now works. This WP enqueue style function actually works. The next part is about the menu again. These are my hard-coded links. What if I want to use that menu system inside WordPress? What if I want to use these menu systems? So I can drag and drop these in different order, and those would be outputted in my theme. That's pretty basic that you probably want to do in your sites. So let's add that in. This is functionality of your site. Good place for that is that functions.php file. So first part is that we need to register that at least one of those theme locations. And now kind of steps in kind of these hooks. There's one chapter in the end about these hooks, that what they actually mean. As you can see in here, we have a hook called init. And then a little bit later on, we have a different hook called after setup theme. These hooks are kind of things that WordPress kind of loads things in different order. And there is an order of those hooks that when we want to some kind of functionality run. And init is one of those hooks. And it's a good practice to have those kind of functionality inside those hooks. Actually, even this would be should go inside one of those hooks, but I'm just going to leave it there now. So I'm just going to copy paste this that you know the difference. Let's go back to the admin. Here was my menus. I don't have any menu locations at the moment. If you have used WordPress, you know that there should be menu locations in here, like checkboxes where I can check my menu. Well, this is exactly for that. I'm gonna keep one menu for WordPress, which is called primary, and I'm gonna give it the location name called header. And this can also, this code snippet, go to the functions.php file. If I now refresh the admin or the customizer, you notice that there's gonna be my header menu option that I can select. If I tick that, nothing happens in the front end. I haven't actually changed anything in the front end yet. So now the next question is that when my next kind of code snippet is like, okay, add a navigation menu in the WordPress, which outputs that menu that we just saw in the customizer. Where should this code snippet go? In which file? We have different files at the moment already. We have folder, functions, header, index, style.cs file. Which of the files I should add my navigation? Which makes sense the most?
Header.
It should be the header. At least there, that was the place that we had our static menu. So I'm just going to take off the static menu. We probably going to need a different code snippet for that. So I'm just going to copy paste that again. Let's open a PHP again. Let's close it. Then copy paste that snippet in there. Notice that the theme location primary needs to match in the ID that we have defined in here. This primary needs to be exactly the same as in here. If I now refresh the page, something should happen in there. I now have the WordPress menu in there. If I now go back to the customizer, menus, I think this was the menu. If I now reorder some of these items, you can see that it actually now works, and it should in the front end. You could leave it as a static if it's a really simple site, but if you are building a little bit more complex site, it makes sense that you can actually change the menu items in the WordPress admin. And that was two-step process. We needed to have the actual menu in the register nav menu functions. Then we needed to output that basically wherever we wanted, but in this case it was the header.php file using the WP nav menu functions. And you don't have to kind of memorize these functions, because all you need to kind of know that there is probably always going to be some function that you can use in there, and after that it's just basically going through the theme handbook and finding out the correct one. Okay, the next part is, if we still have time. Do we have time? I think we do.
You can go.
Yeah, I can go forever if you want, but if you're not busy going anywhere.
I was wondering, should we long?
Let's take at least 10 minutes, if that's fine. So you can get a little bit hang of that, okay, in the end we're gonna need more template functions. So the next one is kind of showcasing that, okay, what is the template hierarchy in here? There are lots of different template files that you can put inside a theme, and depending on the view that what's gonna be loaded in the front end of your site. Couple of the really basics ones are the page.php file and the single.php file. Page.php file is loaded always when you're viewing the actual page, and the single.php is always loaded when you are viewing the built-in post or article in WordPress. I'm just gonna fast forward a little bit in the sense that I'm gonna copy paste just one tip in here, that what you should basically do, that you should basically duplicate the index.php file, rename it page.php, and then just make your changes in here. I'm gonna be a little bit lazy. I'm just gonna take the page in here. If I had the same markup, I would say that I have. Nice. Couple of changes that I'm gonna show. Page. Just gonna add some static text in there for a while. Let's go back to the site. You can see that it's gonna output a page in there, because this is an actual page. So when I am on the page view, I can do whatever I want in that template file, which is called the page.php file. And I can have it differently than any other template file.
Can you explain what you mean by the actual page in WordPress?
Yeah, in WordPress there are kind of different post types. By default there are like three visible post type, which is the post, kind of the article, kind of the news. Then there is pages, which is like about and something like that. Even the media is kind of one of its post types, but maybe a little bit different. So by default you kind of have different kind of post types built in. And when you are building a bigger sites, you probably have different custom post types also in here. So this is, for example, now let's go back for post then. I'm just gonna pick one of the post in here. So this is the post type. And if I'm going to do some differences here, it's still located in the index.php file, because I don't have anything else to feed for WordPress at the moment. So if I'm not now going to add the single.php file, it's used before the index.php file. I'm just gonna copy paste to save some time. I think I have the single.php here also. Let's copy paste that, create that file, and then we're gonna look at those a little bit, that what's different in those. I'm not gonna post. As you can see, this is post. If I go to the front page, it's gonna say the page, because this is the page post type. So you can see that I can kind of mock them, and depending on the view, I can get different results on the front end. Let's go back to the post and check what we have different in here. I have the basic loop in here. I have the content in here, but what's different? The difference is that I have added a couple of extra functions in there. You might guess that the title outputs the post title. It would output the page title also. And maybe we need the date also in there, when the post was published. So there are lots of these kind of functions that you can get out of the box in WordPress. So I only have these couple of functions extra, and you can see that here is my date and here is my post title. If I take off the title, for example, you can see that it's missing from our front end. So this is probably the minimum that you're going to have inside these template files. You're probably going to need to have the title at least and the content. The page is pretty much the same. Oops, let's go to the home page, for example. We had this page info in there. Let's just remove that. You can see that I'm now on page. Let's remove that and refresh. You see that, okay, now it's loading the page.php because we are actually viewing the page post type. You can do those kind of template functions pretty much every view you might imagine. Archive views, home views, author views, and so on and so on. Once again, in the theme handbook, you can read all of those details, that how the template hierarchy actually works. Okay, only a couple of cleaning up things to do, and we can definitely do that in 4 minutes. There are still a couple of static data coming in our theme. One is that the language attributes are actually missing. We don't have any language attributes, which tells different things like search engines. It tells you that which language is your site, and also different kind of screen readers and stuff like that needs that information, that it knows that what is the language of that site and so on. I'm just going to add this inside the HTML tag, that you know the difference. We go back to our header file. I'm just going to remove this time, kind of the lang, but WordPress have its own function for that. Let's add that in. The difference is that if I now go back to my site, you notice that there is this information about your site language. At the moment, my site language is English US, so it's going to output the US in there. So if you change your site language to something else, it's going to output the right language attributes in there. The other part that was missing was, let's go back for a second in the source. Document title still says my title. It's not dynamic yet. And no wonder WordPress have a built-in function for that. It's kind of different in this case. It's kind of adding the theme support for document title, and it's going to output something better by default in there. And that basically, I'm going to copy paste that also to save a little bit time. That's kind of a different hook. The hook is called after setup theme, and I'm only going to add one theme support inside that. So there is a lots of these so-called add theme support functions calls in WordPress. Title tag basically means that output the title tag in the header section so that plugins can mock that, and it's dynamic basically. So you don't have to worry about kind of updating that manually. When I add this one, go back to my site, refresh, source, okay, cache, thank you. Try again, cached, sorry. I might try this forever. Let's try a different page if it works. No. Okay, the demo almost worked in the end, only the last part didn't. I blame the cache for that.
You have the title in the header.
Do I still have it? Oh, thanks. All right, let's take that off. Refresh again. Thanks. That should work. Whoa. And I have a little bit better title in there now. By default, it adds the post or page name and then my site name. And plugins like yours can kind of mock that different way if they want. Then the last part would actually be styling the thing. Let's see if I can just copy paste some styles in there that it would actually look a little bit better. If I have something in here, styles in here, just gonna copy paste it in here. Let's see if it's totally broken. Okay. Here is the finished site with the styles. And that's about it. Now it's time for questions. Anything? For some it might be too fast and for some it might be too slow. But if you have like any questions now, it's a good time to ask. Like I mentioned, if you want to kind of check this afterwards, these are kind of my slides in GitHub/samikeionen/alku, and just kind of check the basics from here. Now your homework is basically going through the theme handbook. There are like 100 different pages in theme handbook, and when you start building your theme, that's the place where you should look for it. Okay, there's this function, this is how the template hierarchy works, and there's another function, and so on and so on. So it needs a little bit knowledge of PHP, lots of knowledge of CSS, lots of knowledge of the HTML when you actually start building the theme. The order is always HTML, CSS, then the PHP. Maybe some JavaScript if you need some functionality of the site.
Yeah. So, any questions? There's one.
Yep.
Which starter theme do you use?
I work at a company called 10up at the moment, and we have our own starter theme called Theme Scaffold. Then we have our own pet project in the GitHub also, which is kind of totally different than the most of the starter themes. If you want to start out with something that pretty much every one of us has started out, it's called the underscores. It's not super maintained anymore, but this is what pretty much everyone I know have kind of started out, even myself. You can kind of get the basics of the HTML structure and basics of the template functions and basics of the lots of those template files and so on from this theme. So I would definitely start basically checking out this theme. So like I mentioned earlier on, and that was kind of question from Kenda also, that when we start our project, we never kind of build themes from scratch. It's always coming from the starter theme, because we don't want to rewrite all of those parts that we just did again and again and again. We need to have those already built in so we can go faster kind of in the actual things that we are building. but this would still be the kind of the first one that I would learn from, even if it's kind of oldish, but old doesn't mean bad in every time. Then if you have been following WordPress a little bit, like WordPress 5.3 came out like a couple of weeks ago, and there is like this different block editor which is there a little bit also in the earlier release, but in 5.3 it's kind of in a spot that you can actually use that block editor, and that might change everything you know about themes like in next 2 years or something. So themes probably won't look anything like this that I showed you today in 2 years. They probably have so-called block templates and style sheet and bringing in the kind of the design tokens like colors and spacing and font sizes and stuff like that. You probably don't need that many templated files actually in 2 years. Because most of that heavy lifting should be done in the block editor already. I'm not sure if you have heard about block editor, which is also called Gutenberg. So it's basically a totally different setup for the. If I edit this post, you can probably see a glance of that. Okay, what the hell is this? Looks a little bit awkward now with this resolution, but basically it's all of these things like paragraphs and call to actions are blocks now, even list are in its own block. And in the end, the idea is that every part of that site is going to be a block. So even this navigation in the header, that would be a block. So everything would be a block in the end. Is that a good or bad thing? It kind of depends on your view, but it's going to happen anyway. So it's nice to kind of prepare for that early on. But that's not going to happen like tomorrow, so you don't need to worry about this stuff that much at the moment. But if you are really like now going into WordPress, the first thing that you should learn is about the blocks and how they work in the front end and how they work in the editor and how it relates to styles in the front end, because that's gonna be the future anyway, so you can't escape that if you're gonna use WordPress as a tool.
Small question, probably not so small. What's your practices or some recommendations how you organize your CSS or styles? Do you use some CSS or whatever methodologies?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I had a presentation about that about 6 months ago. So here is my article about it, maintainable CSS architecture in the Gutenberg era, which means the block editor. I have lots of opinions how the CSS should be maintained, and now it's even more important with the block editor. I can link this up also in the Twitter if you want to read it afterwards, but the basic idea is, if you have ever heard about IT CSS architecture, which is inverted triangle CSS, basically means that you start out with the kind of the tools and settings what you have. Then you have the basic HTML elements, then you have the layout or objects, and then you have your components like navigations, and then you have the utilities, and maybe somewhere in between here you would have the blocks also as a new layer. And the more down you go in this triangle, the more specific the style goes. And you don't have to kind of, everyone who has written CSS know that how hard it is to maintain if you just keep on adding specificity in those class names. Then in the end, it's gonna bite you anyway. So this is one of the architecture I found that really works for me at least, and works like in the block editor era. So I can basically have the same styles in the front end and in the editor without duplicating pretty much any of the CSS. So that's like the biggest benefit for me using this kind of architecture. But that would be once more a different long topic to have, how that actually works. But you can read this up. We can tweet it out in the. Kenta can probably tweet it out in the after the meetup.
Yeah. Okay, let's give a big hand to Sami today.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for giving us great keys to start building our own themes from scratch. Yeah, I also want to thank Frantic again for having us here today and providing us with the drinks and snacks. There's still, I think, some pizza left and